go ahead and get started. I'm Beverly Wood at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and my co-presenter and co-author is Charolette Welsch from the University of Florida. And so we're here to talk to you today about the mini primary source project that we wrote last year and is in site testing right now this semester. So if you haven't heard of TRIUMPS before, you can see what it stands for there. Pretty awesome acronym. And we're happy to have a couple of statistics projects involved here. So Charlotte, you can go to the next slide and tell us more.
So the goal of the TRIUMPS project is to, it says on the screen right, disseminate and evaluate primary source projects that cover undergraduate mathematical content and also, in this case, statistical content based on primary historical sources. So it's all about using primary sources that students might not necessarily encounter in their textbooks, and using those primary sources that actually have a lot of rich information to cover content that they might not necessarily get in their textbooks.
So this is a list of the areas of mathematics and statistics that projects already exist. And we have the link down there at the bottom. I can't remember if we repeated it on our final slide or not, but it's not hard to find if you Google TRIUMPS mathematics or statistics or one of the project names. It'll come up pretty quick. Okay.
So teaching with PSP, students are generally working in groups during a class period or doing some of the smaller activities maybe outside as homework and complete all these different tasks. So each of the PSPs is set up to be a set of tasks that would cover multiple class periods and then also have some homework as well, according to how you kind of wanted to structure your use of the PSP in your class. And so our PSP, which is called Seeing and Understanding Data, allows students to work with printed graphical displays in the activities and then also work with interactive data visualizations as well. And so it's a great use of data visualization starting all the way kind of at the beginning of the first data visualization all the way up to the newer interactive data visualizations now.
So we have basically divided it into 4 parts, and we start with what we're calling ancient visualizations, and then communicating visually as we kind of come up with some of the standard looking graphs. They of course don't look standard when we're looking at them from the 1500s, 1700s, but they're the beginnings, and then making an argument. So Florence Nightingale and kind of uses visual representations of data to tell a story and to advocate for change. And Charles Menard tells us some history. So those are kind of the human element of data. What can you do with data? And then, of course, we move beyond paper and ink and start talking about the electronic versions of Hans Rosling, and kind of Edward Tufte falls there in the middle as moving beyond just the usual standard pie chart, bar chart, that kind of thing.
So the first data visualization we wanted to walk through was just some highlights from each of those sections. So the first one is the time series graph from the 10th, possibly the 11th century, and it's this ancient data visualization that's showing the different orbital time points for these different planets that they called back at this time. So it's a really interesting data visualization to get the students to start thinking about when there wasn't necessarily the labeling of the axes or the kind of idea of how to plot this type of data on a Cartesian plane. So we kind of walk through different questions for the students, looking at what do you think would be the x and y axis for this type of graph, and we provide them with a little snapshot of somebody talking about this data visualization and asking them after they've kind of learned more information about this, what do they kind of see that would make how would they kind of change their answer to describing that. So we can, so feel free to ask any questions as you go through this too, but I'll move on to the next one now. So communicating data visually is the second part. And so there's a set of graphs from Playfair. We have a pie chart and a bar chart, and then this is what we call the circle graph. So this is from the resources of principal states and kingdoms in Europe, and it's looking at the kind of multiple different things on this graph. And so it makes it a little bit complicated, but we really think it's a great graph to get the students to think more deeply about what they're seeing using a graph that they probably won't see in their everyday life right now. And so the circle graph is kind of looking at the different states are representing the circles, and there's a kind of 3 different variables that are going on. And so we're going to make sure that we kind of clarify at the end of the PSP the axis. So there's an axis on this side for the right side of the y-axis, and there's another axis that represents something different on the left side, and then the circles are also representing something as well. And so Beverly's been able to find a better reproduction of this, hopefully, and so we'll be able to kind of provide a more clear picture because it is really hard to be able to see what those axes are looking like. Anything you'd like to add, Beverly?
No, we'll say some more about the notes to instructors at the end. So these are the stories that I was telling you about. On the left is the story that Florence Nightingale was telling the Minister of War about what was happening at the army hospitals during the Crimean War, and she was an awesome mathematician and came up with this polar area diagram determining that the deaths in red were from actual fighting, and the others were not. And in particular, the blue area is because of the sanitary conditions at the hospitals. And so we talked some about Florence Nightingale, her history, the context of the Crimean War, in order to kind of interpret this graph and understand the power that it ended up having. Not only did it change the British Army, but it also changed the United States Union Army, because the Crimean War and the American Civil War weren't that far apart. And so anyway, that's the story she was telling. This is how she told it, and using the data that she collected from thousands of records at the hospitals in the Crimea. And then the Charles Menard graph you've probably seen before. It doesn't show up in all textbooks, either one of these actually. I've seen them in textbooks, but I haven't, not always. But Edward Tufte at least says that this is still the most articulate graph ever. I think there's 6 or 7 different variables being measured on this graph. And again, this picture that I'm demonstrating here is in French, so even if you could read all the letters, you probably couldn't read it. But Wikimedia has an English version, and then you can zoom in on the axes labels down there at the bottom to understand that we're talking about temperatures and the legend there. I mean, yeah, the scale thing there in the piece, and then you can read the city names that are posted there along the brown and black bars. So again, we're telling a story here, and in this case, we're telling the story of this ill-fated march of the French army into Russia, and how it started out with 500,000 soldiers and ended up with far less when they returned to France. So this you can take. You could spend a whole lot of time on this. It could be a cross-disciplinary part if you had high schools might have a little easier time doing something like that with the history of either one of these events that took place in the 1800s. And what's next, Charlotte? I forget. So the Hans Rosling thing, one of the tasks is for them to actually log in. So this is either homework or could be done in a computer lab. Students bring their laptops and work in groups, so not everybody has to have one. It obviously depends on availability, access in your classroom. But the task involves watching the YouTube video that goes through 2010, I think it is, but then directing them to the actual Gapminder website in order that they can even see these more recent years and have them focus in on one country and look at some of the ways that you can parse the data to find out information about a particular part of the world.
So we also have the section at the end of all these activities and tasks is the notes to instructors, and so we have a few ideas for additional alternative activities. So there's a couple of activities that you could either, you want to say how you could do it for homework, or if you wanted, there's one activity where you could allow students to kind of estimate their distances between two cities that goes along with the first ancient visualization, and they would be able to do that on their own at home, or you could have them do it in class. So it's just extra activities. And then we also have the web images for projecting in the classroom, and we hope as we are able to get some more clear versions of Playfair graphs, we hope to provide even clearer images, hopefully. And then we also have background information for the time period, just providing a little bit more detail than we gave in the few paragraphs within each section. And then we give a little bit of direction on kind of expected answers that we would kind of expect students to be able to write. So kind of get that right or wrong answer.
So some of the anticipated struggles would be being able to read the text. So those Playfair graphs have, rather interesting spelling and calligraphy, and then of course Menard's is in French, and so there's that challenge, plus the size and the quality of the images that we were able to get, which we're working on. We think we found a path forward to get at least new images, hopefully with good resolution. And of course, this is an accessibility issue for the visually impaired. We're asking them to look at graphs. Screen reader can't read it. And so that's something to be aware of. And then, of course, some students are going to have some anxiety over the fact that they've never seen a graph that looks like this before. Graphs are used in the elementary school, middle school, high school, and we're usually talking about the same things that are in our college textbooks, introductory textbooks. And some of these don't even look anything like those things, and so there could be some anxiety over that. But we're asking them to interpret them, not necessarily create them. I think there is one task where we ask if they could make one like this, but I think that's a pie chart, if I'm correct, Charlotte.
Yeah.
So that's some of the things that we anticipate might be challenging. But again, our site testers, we've got a couple here with us, and they're going to let us know what other interesting challenges they run across.
So we have also a slide just on terms of classroom implementation. So we've kind of structured it so that would be over 2 days, either in like a 50-minute section or maybe if you have that 75-minute class period 2 days a week. So day 1 would go over the introduction, and then section 1 and 2, which is those ancient data visualizations, and then the play fair graphs. And then there's an optional subsection for 2.2 as homework that you could give and then talk about at the next class period. And then day 2 would be section 3, which is the Charles Menard graph and all of the Florence Nightingale data visualizations. And then section 4 is the Hans Rosling and Edward Tufte's principles of graphical design. And so it just want to note that subsection 4.2 does require computer access, so it might require you to either have that in the lab one day or have students bring in laptops. In general, we think that this is a great project to use in your intro stats classes, the data science courses, and then also we think it would work well in a mathematics education course. We're having students that are learning how to teach those statistical components of the Common Core, and then also general student audiences for courses that use data displays, maybe in a biology class for a review or some other kind of science class as well.
So there are our emails addresses, and they're included in the PSP as well itself, so you can contact us when you have questions, if you use it, if there's something we can talk with you about, need to brainstorm how to fit it into one day, or how to make it groups, or I think it'd be challenging, but we could talk about accessibility issues. I think we could brainstorm some ideas. So appreciate your attention and happy to answer any questions you have.
Charlotte, I'll offer one.
Yes.
If we could go back to the first of the visualizations, that 10th century one. I'm interested in wondering what instructors are getting from the students as their interpretations of this.
Gotcha. So we do not actually, I don't actually have an answer for you for that, because Beverly and I both have actually not implemented this in our classes yet. So I'm hoping to do mine later this semester, and then Beverly's not teaching this semester. And so our site testers, we have about 4 site testers that are using it over at least this next month, I believe, and into March. And so it will be really interesting, because I think as somebody that's kind of been looking at it a lot, it would be really hard to think, okay, what would an actual student think about it? Do you have any ideas?
Well, the problem is that I have a sense of what it might actually be trying to describe, and so that's clearly going to pollute my answer.
Right.
I do think it'll be fascinating. You might think that this is how they move through the sky over the course of a year or some such. And if a person knows some astronomy, he'll pretty quickly rule that out. I don't think most of our students have a good understanding of how planets move, because why would they? Yes, it'll be really, I look forward to hearing that also. I will say, I think it's absolutely fantastic that there's this graph from the 11th century and the Gapminder in one project.
I think that's pretty cool as well. It kind of just shows you the wide range of data visualizations and how it's been around for so long, even though you not necessarily think that you've been using graphs since the beginning of the 11th century. So.
And moreover, one of our goals for these projects is not that they teach history or even the history of math, but that they use the history to teach the math. And the fact that there's this range, I think, really gets at that in a way that makes it clear what you're doing. So nice job.
I have a question. The graphs that you showed on the screen, some of them are in color. They look really nice. All I have right now is the PDF with the black and white graphs. So if I contact you, could I get a copy of that I could use in my classroom?
Yeah, yes, yeah, definitely. So I think this one, I think, yeah, it was the reprint. I believe, I'd have to go back and double check, but I think the link on the, that's in the instructor notes, I believe links to the color graph. Do you remember, Beverly?
Well, I printed it this morning and it printed in color. So check your printer
The
setting.
PDF. I
Yeah.
didn't try to print it in color. I didn't realize it would. I'll try that.
Try that, but yeah, we can get you the images.
Okay.
And in the reference list, if not in the PSP itself, in the reference list we gave links mostly to Wikimedia because of copyright protections, but they're all in the public domain. So you can Google them, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Google knows all.
Google knows all. But yeah, definitely for the Menard graph, we gave you the link straight to the Wikimedia version that's in English, and so you can zoom in down to the so you can read the graphs. The English translation puts the temperature in Celsius, Fahrenheit, and whatever this. I'd never heard of it before. Well, I maybe have heard of it, but I've never used it. This Rhymier. Now I can't read it, but it's a different scale altogether for measuring temperature, and that's what it was originally in. But this translation one did the conversions for us. No other questions? Comments? You think it's going to work? You think we can really do it in 2 days?
When you say 2 days, do you mean 2 50-minute periods or 2 hour and 15-minute periods? Either or?
Yeah, I think that'd probably be 2 days. I think it'd be
Hour and
easier
15.
to do it in the longer block. I think it'd be a little harder to squeeze it into 2 50-minute. But again, you don't have to do every task. You can skip some. You can do it in large group instead of several small groups, and to avoid the coming back together and let's talk about what everybody saw. You can shave some time doing it in one large group or.
I reviewed this now, so I'm a little bit biased, I suppose, at this point. But I feel it's going to be successful, and I feel like one thing that's going to be absolutely great is some of the challenges that you mentioned the students would face. Because the beginning of a stats class, we often review bar graphs and pie charts with them because we kind of have to, and it's incredibly boring. We can try hard to say something interesting, but it's so boring because they've been doing this all of their lives. But this isn't boring. This is almost what they've done before, and many of these graphs will hopefully provide exactly that right amount of cognitive dissonance to make them have to stop and think and engage. I am looking forward to hearing what people's experience is, and I am optimistic.
I definitely think so too. I think the context of the data sets are more interesting. Maybe we could delve a little bit deeper in, and so they're not seeing concerns about something that's I don't know. What's your favorite kind of activity or TV show that you like? Okay, we're going to create a bar graph because it's got a bar there. So hopefully it'll be kind of more of a hook to get the students more interested in kind of delving deeper into understanding those types of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yes.
I had used the Florence Nightingale diagram with a group of middle school students at one point, and one thing that we did was actually constructing diagrams like this. So I was wondering Have you done that with students before? Does it have any kind of benefit with regard to thinking about the mathematics behind whether this is a good display or an important display to partake in, or what your opinion on that is? Is my question clear? It didn't sound clear when it came out.
No, I think I know what you're asking, and I think it'd have to be the right audience. We were trying to create the document to fit with sort of any stats class or data science class at an introductory level. But I think teachers of mathematics, or if you wanted to use it in some other,
like a history class.
Like a history class or something, you could talk about the math. But what I'm getting at is that we didn't design it for a class that would have a prerequisite that included the math that would be needed to do it.
Oh, okay.
Create one. But it would be, with the right audience, a great investigation, because I think that, you know, there's some pretty robust mathematics going on there. You know, and
I'm wondering even if that part wouldn't be an important task for stats students, but like just asking about, and maybe I skipped this because I've got too many screens open right now. Just like why this display as opposed to some other display? That seems like that would be an interesting conversation, going with what Dominic had just said, you know, this boring kind of other displays that students are met with all the time that they probably don't even pay attention to because they're boring.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting reasoning in this diagram, I think.
Right. I totally hear you. One question we do ask them is, what sort of tools would she needed to have used? And so an instructor could put forward some of the mathematical concepts as part of the tool inventory. In that case, we do link to some items in the mathematical treasure. No, did we end up using any of those? Yeah. Mathematical treasures. Maybe the Smithsonian or whatever. So you
I saw the Smithsonian.
Have a look at the tools that she would have had available to her when she did it. But we didn't explicitly talk about the mathematics, but it's something we could add in as like an optional activity.
Well, I guess I didn't even mean, I promise I'll be quiet just in case other people have questions, but I guess I didn't even really mean the mathematics in the last question that I asked, that these displays like Playfairs and Nightingales and who's the French dude?
Menard.
And, that the choices that these persons made to display the data that they were trying to portray were really very different choices and very different means, right? So even outside the mathematics of how those were constructed, why they made the choices to present the data in the ways that they did, I think could make for an interesting, maybe an optional kind of discussion kind of task. That's the part. I don't teach stats, but that's the piece that's really interesting to me is as soon as I see a display like this, is why in the heck would they do that? I mean, I kind of know, but if I was a student, that's what I would ask.
That's a good observation, yeah.
It's very lovely. Your work here, it's very lovely.
Thank you.
You mean it wasn't a menu option in RStudio?
It wasn't, no.
Or to Menard, RStudio.
Okay, I have a question. I came in, well, I've been listening, but I've been having internet problems.
Oh, no.
God love it. So I think I came in the middle of the part of you know, having issues with the accessibility, which as the instructor with accessibility issues, I have issues with accessibility. And that was, you know, some of it, obviously, you're not supposed to be able to completely read, but the question, sometimes you're asking questions that you're assuming that somebody can read some of it.
and some of these I can't read anything. And we talked about this a little bit, but it becomes an issue when you can't, like with the Marie Curie ones, there's enough information in the description for me to piece together what the picture is, even though I can't read any of the letters, numbers, whatever on the picture. I can guess from the description of it what I'm looking at. And some of it we're not trying to like explain it all because we want the kids to explain it, but sometimes I don't know, the circle graph one, for example.
Right, and that's probably the worst one as far as the quality of the image. And I don't know if you heard that we've recently found libraries that own these original copies and have the opportunity to have them rescanned at high resolution. So we're looking into getting that done. And the way they print, like I printed it out this morning, and this, it's simply not big enough to read. However, the the reference list has the links that would go to.
Yeah, and I looked at the links, and it didn't help.
And that you not zooming
it didn't
in.
help. No, it did not help.
No, for this one I agree. Because I've tried zooming in.
And I've looked at all the links of the stuff that we had links for, and most of that did not add any more clarity to. Did not. And I'm using, and I'm looking at this on my computer where I can zoom in as, but of course that loses the resolution, and I still can't make heads or tails of it. So I'm just really trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my kids, that how I'm gonna, so like this one, it's I don't know.
We can talk individually, and I can try and kind of point.
There's some. This is what there's like I said with the French, there's enough information in the sort of in the legend for me to okay, this is this is that, I can guess, but this one, there's circles and there's lines.
Yeah.
That's about all I can tell you.
Yeah. So we're looking, we're trying, we're gonna try and get better resolution pictures, but these were fold out of books.
Oh, sure.
And so when they were scanned, they're bigger than the bed of a regular scanner, and so so a lot of what we found available on the public domain, weren't the best images, and they might have been taken some time ago. And of course, we're taking images of old books, so
of course
too.
But this is a great conversation, and if we can keep Mary in the loop as you find these, she's marvelous as a supporter of Triumph.
I'm a good guinea pig for for accessibility issues.
And
my kids might have less trouble than I
don't want that to be the issue. The reason why you don't use this or something in the class, and
I'm hoping to use this with my, I'm planning on using this, or at least part of this, with my elementary teachers on our data module later in the semester, to give them, instead of like Dominic I think said about how to do a bar graph, really
exactly right.
Really. And then that comes toward the end of, because I have an elementary school teacher class that does everything in one semester.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
it's actually a good conversation for prospective teachers to have about the accessibility.
Yeah. So I definitely want to use some of this to give them a perspective as to how we represent data. And I just, I'm not sure. I may only be able to use some of the graphs, and really for serious questions, because I may not even be able to. They may actually be able to see more than I do. I don't know, but
And Charlotte, as you're working with the libraries that own it, let me know if there's a cost for really high.
Well, all three of them are at the Library of Congress, which might not be very expensive to do.
Might not be very expensive, but Triumph has funds for this sort of thing if you need them.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. It's really cool. I mean, I think it's like, oh, wow, something completely different than just drawing pie charts.
Yeah, exactly.
With those kids.
That's kind of the gap we were trying to fill is, you know, when you know everyone in your class already knows how to make a bar chart and a histogram, what can you do with that space?
Yeah, exactly. And we ask why do, I mean, and of course with the elementary teachers, you're asking why do we do it this way?
Yeah, right.
Could we do it a different way? Which I think the question was, could we explain why they did it in this way? I think that's
Exactly.
kind of a very pertinent question to the
Yeah.
future teachers is why are we representing it this way? That's cool. Which is cool. But yeah. And I apologize. I know we were having a conversation and I lost the thread. Go figure. And I will be happy to get back to that conversation later.
Yeah.
It's also an important conversation, though. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Well, webinar leaders, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And we will edit this recording as necessary for clarity and get it online for people who couldn't join us today. And thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.